If you think about European banking, you've got to think about it in the round. It's not just about the size of the lending books, it's also about investment banking. So when I refer to investment banks, what I mean is the banks who are involved in trading securities, in supporting the primary market in securities, taking firms through to public ownership through IPOs and so on. A core issue is probably the relative size and depth of the markets, the traded markets between America and Europe. And that has meant that probably that the European banks have lost ground, not just in European terms, but globally in terms of their involvement in those securities markets. The policy takeaway for Europe is really moving faster to develop the capital markets in Europe. That would reduce the overbanked nature of Europe, and it would also give the European banks that entree into investment banking, enabling them to go further than they can currently go. The risk is still that Europe has left it too late, that the size now of the American investment banks relative to the European investment banks will mean that even if the capital market union eventually generates a much deeper, larger market, the American banks could still take a very large portion of it. I think the issue about European investment banks applies across Europe. It's not just the Eurozone. I think it's an issue across Europe in terms of the ability of the European banks to compete effectively in that market. A few do, but it's much more limited, I think, than is the case in America. In the light of the need to build up the capital markets in Europe, I think this does create a policy issue for the governments across Europe, including the UK, in terms of how do you move forward with a big combined capital market that is the Eurozone and the UK together. And to achieve that, it's very important that Europe and the UK work together on passporting issues, that actually Brexit doesn't lead to a greater fragmentation of the markets, which would go in totally the wrong direction.